This video is intended to give you a high-level overview of the X-Resize tool, which is part of the X-Analysis suite of products from Fresche Legacy. X-Analysis facilitates the analysis as well as the execution of a project to enlarge a database field in your IBMI application. Many of our customers in the past have used X-Analysis with great success to identify the impact of such a project and understand exactly where in the application files, programs, etc. need to be modified in order to adjust for the enlargement of a field. Typically, this would be a field such as a packing list number, an invoice number, a customer number, any field that is no longer large enough to accommodate the data that it needs to accommodate. So a lot of our customers had great success using our tool to analyze and understand the impact of that, and then executed the project using manual development means. X-Resize allows you to actually automate a large portion of the execution of the project, so actually updating the source code and making the modifications necessary to enlarge that field, and greatly reduces the manual effort required not only in the analysis but in the actual execution of the project. So I'll step very quickly through the steps that are involved in using the tool and actually executing a resize project. It's important to understand that this type of project really is a combination. To have a successful project, you really need a combination of the tool plus a methodology to use the tool, understand it, and leverage it as best possible. For that reason, we highly recommend that anyone who purchases the X-Resize tool also engages us for several weeks of services to assist them on their first resize project, help them understand how to use the tool expertly, and also train them on the methodology to properly use the tool and have a successful project. All of our happiest customers who have purchased this tool have used that type of strategy in order to execute their first project and have gone on to be very successful in the use of the tool. So let's dive right into the tool and show you how it works. As you can see over here on the left-hand side in the navigation window, I've opened an example repository that we have here on our IBMI server, which is called XR-Test-XA. And if you're licensed for the X-Resize product, you'll see an X-Resize icon here within the repository. So I'll go ahead and open that up. Within here, we can see all of the different tasks which we might need to execute during a resizing project. And I'll step through them and explain what needs to be done at each step of the process. So the first thing we want to do is use the setup icon here to define what is the length of the field that we're changing and how much we're enlarging it by. What are we incrementing the field by? So at this point, we're not identifying a particular field. We're simply setting the parameters, in this case, to tell X-Resize that we are changing a field that is 5 characters long, and we are incrementing it by 2. So we're going to change it from 5 to 7 characters long. Again, we're not specifying a field here because X-Analysis is actually going to help us find the fields that need to be changed based on some additional parameters that we'll give it. So we can go ahead and apply that. I should mention that some of the steps in the X-Resize product are batch jobs, which are executed over the entire set of application code and can take a little while to complete. So for the purposes of this demo, a lot of these jobs have already been run, and I'll show you the results as we go. The second thing that we want to do is set up some search words. So what we're going to try and do first is identify exactly what are the fields which are going to need to be enlarged for the purposes of this project. So for this project, we're going to enlarge our customer number field from 5 characters to 7 characters long. So I'm going to start by searching just for the string cuss. And this is going to bring me up a list of fields that might fall within the parameters of my project. So I'm going to go ahead and run the search. This one will run. It doesn't take too long. And that'll launch a batch job on my IBMI server, which is going to do the extraction and produce the list of all of the fields that might fall within the parameters of the job. So once our search is finished, we can go and see the different fields that X-Analysis has retrieved for us by clicking on the fields icon here. And you can see it's brought back any field in our application, our database field I should say, which contains that string cuss that we searched for. So we can see cuss no here, so that's definitely one that we want to consider. We can also see this in fields from some other tables that we see down here that have different names, but they look like they're customer related. So these that are 5.0, definitely customers, we're going to want to change those as well. But we can also see that we have a couple here that it's picked up that we definitely don't want to include. So these are hours fields, not a customer number field. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the search, and we're going to add an exclusion. So I'm going to ask it to, from my search for cuss, I'm going to ask it to exclude anything which has hours in the description or in the field name or so on. And then we're going to rerun our search. So as you can see, this is an iterative process, and this is part of the methodology of executing the Resize project, is that the first thing you need to do is this iterative process to narrow down and identify exactly which of the database fields that you're going to need to change as part of this project. So that search should be done by now. Let's go back and look at our field list again. And you can see that the hours fields have now disappeared from our list. So again, you need to go through that process. The first thing to do is make sure that you have this, this list of fields looking more or less complete. So this would be a fresh legacy expert working with a customer who has some application knowledge and really nailing down the list of fields that are going to be within the scope of our resize. So once we're happy with that list of field names, the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to have to build a list that's going to create a detailed impact analysis of wherever all of these fields are used and what are the lines of code in the application, what are the places that we're potentially going to need to change as a result of this field sizing project. So I'm going to click on Build List, and all that's going to do is it's actually going to run a file field where used inquiry and output that data into the detailed impact analysis file for this particular resize project. And we'll go and have a look at that file as soon as the job's completed. So once that job finishes, we have a detailed impact analysis that we can look at. Double-clicking over here on detailed impact analysis. And this is going to show us all of the lines of code which contain fields which are potentially impacted by this field size change. So it's looked through all of those fields that we determined in the first step, analyzed the code, and come back and is listing us all of the lines of code that might be impacted. So we see the name of the source member down the left-hand side, the actual sequence number within the source member where a field was found. As well as the line of code itself, so we see the actual line of code. We also have an action code, and the presence of an action code indicates that X-Analysis, or X-Resize more specifically, has determined that that line of code will need to be changed. So obviously here we can see there's some definitions of customer number as 5 signed with 0 decimals. That's going to need to be changed to 7 signed 0 decimals, and so on. You will also see some lines of code which have no action code, and that just indicates that although that line of code contains a field that is going to be impacted, the line of code really doesn't need to change. It's going to work even though the length of the field has changed. So again, at this point in the process, there's some manual analysis which is required to look at this list and really determine if there's any lines of code there that X-Analysis has retrieved which don't seem to be within the scope. You can also start to identify if there's some situations where a manual change might be necessary. For example, string commands or concatenate commands that might need to be done manually rather than by X-Resize. So this list can be sorted out as you wish. Sometimes it can be convenient to sort this out by command, so you can see all your declares and then all of your different C-specs and so on together, your CL commands together. So again, this is all part of the methodology, and something that the Fresh Legacy X-Resize expert can guide the customer on the best practices for analyzing this and validating the list of statements that are going to need to be changed. So we've now gone through two steps where in the first step, we've identified all of the fields which should be included in the scope of our resize project. We've done some iterative searches within the code to make sure we have the exact list of fields that we need. And then in the second step, we've actually identified all of the precise lines of code which stand to be impacted, reviewed the list, and perhaps refined the fields that we want to include based on that. So the end goal of those two steps, is where we've arrived at, is a definitive list of all of the lines of code which are going to need to be changed as part of the resize project. So the next step is really to execute in an automated way the changes to the code that are going to need to be done for us to convert this customer number from 5 characters to 7 characters. So X-Resize helps us do a very large percentage of those changes in an automated fashion. So the next thing we want to do is run a conversion. What you see here, this cusconv1, is what we call a conversion library, and we can create as many conversion libraries as we want to do kind of what-if scenarios, test it out with different fields, different field lifts if we need to. And it's within this conversion library that you're actually going to convert the source code and make the changes that need to be changed. So usually we would start with the files by right-clicking on the conversion library here, cusconv1. We get a context-sensitive menu that allows us to execute the different stages of the code conversion. So the first thing we would want to do is convert the files. This will actually update the DDS code wherever necessary in order to change the length of that field from 5 characters to 7 characters. At that point, we would want to recompile those files, and we can check if there's any compile errors that need to be addressed, things that need to be done manually. And then we go through the same conversion steps for the programs. So actually convert the programs, and then recompile the programs. And you can actually run this whole process of 4 steps together by clicking on Run Complete Conversion. And X-Resize will sequence that for you and run those different jobs as necessary. So the result of that is actually converted source and ultimately converted objects once the recompile is done. You do have the opportunity within X-Analysis also to review the results of the compile. Program compile errors, if there were any, are listed here under program compile errors. And you can drill in and look at the compile list for a particular program if there was a problem. Review any error messages that might be at the bottom. Again, I want to make the point that X-Resize an X-Resize project will require some manual intervention. There are things that the tool won't pick up, but it does automate a very, very large percentage of it to give you a huge time saving in the execution of one of these projects. So once we've done the conversion and the compile, there's a kind of a process of reconciling any compile errors. And it may be that those compile errors will reveal that we missed a field somewhere along the way and we need to go back and redefine our field list, recreate our impact analysis, and go through those iterations of the first 2 steps again. So let's have a look at some of the converted source, and you can see exactly the type of changes that X-Resize is able to automate. Let's have a look at a CL program first. We'll look at this customer letter program. So what we can see in the code is that X-Resize has automatically changed the definition of our customer number fields. And we look at these, the first 2 lines here. we can see that it's commented out the old definition of this field cuss.nn, which was 5 characters long, and it's added a new line for cuss.nn, a definition as 7 characters long. So note that X-Resize will not delete the old line, it actually comments it out, and wherever it has commented or added lines, it's indicated with an annotation of star XR size. So you can really see and understand where X-Analysis, X-Resize has made those changes. So that's a CL program. We can also go in and look at a display file program. So let's look at this OE001DF. So this is my display file DDS, and we can see that, again, X-Resize has commented out the line for a couple of these fields and added a new line with a 7-digit code instead of a 5-digit code. We can even look at those screens by clicking up here on this little green screen icon up on the top. And X-Resize will show us the new field. So we can see here that customer number is now 7 characters long. Lastly, we can look at an RPG program here, which has been modified by X-Resize. And we can see that just the same as the CL and the DDS, it's commented out a line that needed to be changed here, this cuss.prm field, and it's converted it from 5 characters long to 7 characters long. And it's put in some comments so we can identify in the code where a change has been made in an automated way by X-Resize. There are also some tools for being able to evaluate what X-Resize has done in an automated way. We saw that there's a way to drill in and see any compile errors for files or programs through the X-Resize tool so that you can address those in a manual way if necessary, or perhaps by refining the field list that's within the scope of our project. There's also a conversion trace which allows you to see a history of exactly all of the different lines of code that were changed by X-Resize. And this can be useful for doing debugging if you have some problems with the compile of those programs. So that gives a good general overview of how the X-Resize tool can really drastically reduce the effort involved in this type of project, and perhaps even more importantly, increase the accuracy. As you can imagine, doing this type of analysis and executing this type of project just with manually through standard development tools and you know, looking visually in all of the programs, trying to figure out which fields need to be changed in order for this to be done successfully can be an extremely time-consuming task. And at the end of the day, you know, fields are always missed. There's a lot of debugging to do, sometimes a lot of risk of errors occurring in production once the project has been implemented. Fresche Legacy has executed a number of these field resizing projects in partnership and providing services to our customer with a great deal of success, and in some cases with thousands and thousands of objects actually being updated into production at the end of the project with no errors and no production problems occurring subsequent to that. So that's X-Resize, part of the X-Analysis suite of tools from Fresche Legacy.